Now, most people think they know how far they hit their irons, but do they really? People usually know how far they may hit it in the air, carry, or they may know how far it goes in total, including the rollout. But which number is the one you should be using? Also, there's one other number that no amateurs seem to know about or use. In this video, I'm going to go over all that and reveal what that number is that no one uses and why it's costing you strokes. Now, a couple times a year, I will go and check my different yardages to see where I'm at. Now, my recent surgery, my intestinal surgery, has caused me to not swing nearly as hard as I used to. So it was really critical that I find out how far I'm actually hitting my irons now. So I went to a local facility to see what my numbers were. Now, when I show you what my numbers were, I'm going to reveal something that was shocking to me and proves exactly why you need to do this at least once a year. Ideally, in order to get accurate numbers, you need to use the more expensive equipment. Now, some of the very small, personal, couple $100 launch monitors, they're nice and they have their place. But to determine the numbers that are really critical, you really need to use something like a TrackMan, Foresight, a Quad 4, something along those lines to get accurate yardages. In a perfect world, you would do this twice. You would do this once inside on a launch monitor, which is generally where we're going to find these. There's lots of indoor facilities where you can go play golf courses and things like that virtually, but it also allows you to have an area where you can hit at a range virtually, and there you'll be able to get a lot of really good numbers. But the performance characteristics off of an indoor mat is not exactly the same as hitting off of grass. Ideally, you'll have some numbers that come off of the grass as well. I do both, and I do it as an average. They're generally pretty close, but I definitely see some differences in my launch and spin characteristics. And in this video, I'm just going to show you some of the swings and some of the things that I did inside hitting some balls and the numbers from there, because it still proves and shows the numbers that are critical for you to know before you go out and play. So the first thing is you need to be hitting a number of balls with each club. I was able to enter in the name of each one of my clubs. So a 58-degree wedge, 54, 50, pitching wedge, 9, 8, 7, 6, and so on up to my driver. Now for each club, I generally hit 3 to 5 balls depending upon how well I struck them. It is important that you include shots that are not perfectly struck, because unless you're a very good player, you don't perfectly strike the ball too often. However, you should throw out the ones that were just really bad shots, because they don't really tell you much on how a fairly well-struck shot will perform. Now this video shows some of my wedges and shorter irons as well as some of my drivers, but really I think what we want to do is to get to the numbers. So here's what we found. The first thing to look for is really your distance in which you carry the ball. Now this number really is probably the most critical number, because often we need to be able to make sure we know how far we carry it in the air so that we can carry hazards, whether it's a bunker, water, or maybe it's just a big ravine in front of the green. First thing that you're going to be looking for is not only the total distance, but the gapping. You want to make sure that the spacing, the distances that you hit, your wedge to your 9 to your 8, that you suddenly don't have a big number that is way bigger than normal. So if you normally have 10-yard gapping and then suddenly you get to one club and it's a 20-yard gap, well, that can be a problem. And that's actually what I found when I did this. I'm not sure exactly how this has happened, because I didn't notice a difference before I went in for surgery. Now, granted, I've only played 2 rounds of golf since I came out, and both times the golf courses were fairly short. And the gapping problem that I have is in my longer irons, which I generally don't hit all that often. I'm going to get to that a little bit later in the video to show you those specifics. So the second number that's really important is to look at the total distance. Now, if you look at what my wedges were, my 58, my 54, 50, All those, only the total distance was only a yard or two longer than how far it carried. And that's important to know. I know that those clubs are stopping very fast. However, if you look at the way that the ball is reacting on the green for the 6, the 5, and the 4, those balls are running out quite a ways, 10, 11, 12 yards. It's important to know how far the ball is rolling out on average for you. You need to take that into account, along with the carry. So here's why. If there's trouble in front of the green, you want to make sure that you have a club that will carry that if you hit it fairly well. But by the same measure, you have to understand where the trouble is. In many cases, over the green is really bad, at least here in the Northeast United States. Most greens tend to fall off once you get over the green, making things very difficult and frequently a lot of trouble. If you're coming into a green where that, for me, a 5 or a 4 iron, and I know that's going to run out maybe 10 yards, I have to take that into account and either land the ball short of my distance that I'm looking to carry it and have it roll out, or land it short of the green. So here's a perfect instance. A lot of times we may shoot a yardage with our rangefinder, and let's say it's 190 yards, and we have a club that we think we hit 190 yards. But let's say the pin is towards the back, and let's say we hit the ball really well and it flies 190 yards, but it rolls another 10 and it goes over the green. Now there's plenty of room in front of the pin, and we could have used less club that would have rolled out to 190 yards. So instead of maybe hitting a 5 iron, I would have hit a 6 iron that would have landed on the front of the green and then rolled back to the pin. The harder shots, of course, are smaller targets. Have to force carry and then have a very small area for the ball to land. And those are the more difficult shots. But frequently, for most amateur golfers and most courses that they're playing, they have the ability of bouncing it up onto the green, or maybe just on the left side of the green or something along those lines, if they have a club that has a lot of run out in it, and you have to know this. However, there is one other number that you have to know. And for amateur golfers, it's probably more important than any other number. That number is the deviation, standard deviation in which you hit the ball in the air. What is that? That is, if you hit, say, a pitching wedge 120 yards on average, you need to take a look at what that range is. Sometimes it might be 115, sometimes it might be 125, depending upon how consistent you strike the ball. If you have a forced carry over a bunker or water, and you know that a decent shot frequently will only carry 115, and you have 120 to carry that bunker, you don't have the margin for that. You need to know that. Either that you're going to have to swing, full swing, all out swing, or you're going to need to take more club. This is also very important if pins are back. If the pin is at the back edge of the green and you're trying to fly it almost to there, and you know your ball will stop, but you know that you have 3 to 4 yards, you might actually hit it farther, you have to take that into account, because nobody wants to hit a really good shot that goes way past your target. Not because you did anything wrong, but maybe it's that super pure shot. And instead, you need to be able to take that into account, choking down on the club a little, or doing whatever you do to take a few yards off of the club. Now, tour players don't really have that issue, because reality is they pretty much strike the ball solidly all the time. And that allows them to have great distance control. Most times you'll hear tour players talk about how they shot a really good score because they had such great distance control, or they had great numbers for that day. Meaning that they were able to control the distance, or the distances that they had in were basically the numbers that they hit stock shots. For an amateur, you need to be able to know what the variables are for your irons. Here's what I found when I did all this data. As you can see, my 6 iron and my 5 iron fly and go almost the same distance. Why is that? Something's happened to my 6 iron. I don't really know what it is. In all likelihood, 6 iron is a club that I use. I practice a lot for most of my swing work. Either my driver, my 6 iron, or my wedges are usually what I'm using. that club with the speed that I swing it, hitting down into a lot of mats, either over the winter and now this spring with hitting indoors, or at our club we hit off of mats about half the week, has probably done something to the loft on that club. Because as you can see, all the characteristics are off. One of the things that you want to look for is a stepping, not only in your distances, but if you have a problem, you want to make sure that the launch angle is consistently stepping as well. And as you can see in these numbers, something's way off. The gap is off on that as well. So what do? I have a local guy that can do some work on my clubs, and I'm going to take those clubs over, probably my 7, 6, 5, and 4, and get them on a lie and loft. It's not really a machine, but it's a setup where they can tell you exactly how much loft and how much lie, or the angle at which the shaft comes into the club, what those are, and making sure what those progressions are. It may be that mine got bent and it needs to be bent back. Now, this is not something that the average person either has the equipment for, nor should they try, because if you don't know what you're doing, you could permanently damage your club and compromise the structure of the head. I'm not going to cover that or show that in this video. I'll probably do it in a future vlog. But if you found this information important, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like. Lets me know that you enjoy content like this. Until next time, enjoy the walk.